The dimly lit ambiance of La Maison Étoilée radiated opulence, with chandeliers casting golden hues over the polished oak floors and elegant white tablecloths. The low murmur of patrons enjoying their meals combined with the delicate clinking of glasses, creating a symphony of sophistication. Andre Ellis stood at the threshold, his tailored charcoal suit catching the soft glow of the entryway lights. His presence was confident but understated, an aura befitting someone accustomed to observing without being observed. Andre stepped forward, greeted by the maitre d', a wiry man with sharp cheekbones and an air of practiced aloofness. "Good evening," Andre said, his voice smooth and polite. "Reservation for Ellis, 7 o'clock. The maitre d's expression faltered, his smile slipping into something less welcoming. His eyes flicked over Andre, taking in his dark skin, his unassuming demeanor. "Ah, yes," he said, glancing down at the reservations list. He lingered longer than necessary before nodding. "Right this way." Andre followed, his eyes subtly scanning the room. He was no stranger to such environments, restaurants with reputations so lofty, they seemed designed to intimidate. Yet tonight, he wasn't here to marvel at the decor or indulge in the cuisine. He had a purpose. The maitre d' led him to a small table in the far corner of the room, tucked away from the main dining area. It was a table that seemed designed for invisibility, meant for guests the establishment preferred not to showcase. Andre raised an eyebrow but said nothing, settling into the chair and placing his leather-bound notebook on the table. "Your server will be with you shortly," the maitre d' said, avoiding eye contact as he briskly walked away. Andre leaned back, letting the moment wash over him. He had faced worse, and he wasn't here for the pleasantries. He pulled out his phone and began typing notes, his fingers moving quickly as he captured the initial impressions of the restaurant's treatment. From the kitchen, Chef Claude Renaud peered out through the small window. The tall, broad-shouldered chef had a reputation as fiery as his sauces. His sharp features twisted into a scowl as his eyes landed on Andre. "Who seated him?" Claude barked, his voice carrying over the clatter of pans and knives. The kitchen staff froze, exchanging uneasy glances. "That's the reservation for Ellis," replied the sous chef, Amélie Duval, her voice measured. "He arrived on time." Claude scoffed. "I don't care if he's the president of France. This is a 5-star establishment, not a place for—" He paused, his lips curling. "Tourists." Amelie's jaw tightened, but she said nothing, turning back to her work. She had learned to pick her battles with Claude, whose prejudices and temper had driven away more staff than the restaurant's reputation could replenish. Out in the dining area, Andre's waiter arrived, a young man who looked barely out of college. His discomfort was palpable as he placed the menu on the table without a word, avoiding eye contact. Andre thanked him anyway, watching as the waiter retreated quickly, his hands trembling. Andre opened the menu, his trained eyes scanning the selections. The descriptions were verbose, filled with words like artisanal and curated, clearly designed to justify the astronomical prices. He chuckled softly, jotting down another note. Across the room, a couple of diners glanced at Andre, whispering to each other. Their curiosity was evident, their stares lingering just a moment too long. Andre met their gaze briefly, offering a polite nod, which sent them turning back to their meals. The evening progressed, with deliberate sluggishness. The waiter returned, forgetting to bring bread, then again without the wine Andre had requested. Each time, Andre remained composed, his demeanor calm, but observant. His notebook filled steadily, capturing every detail. The faintly condescending tone of the staff, the way the other diners received impeccable service while his table was overlooked. From the kitchen window, Claude continued to watch, his irritation growing. "What is he writing?" he muttered to himself, the paranoia gnawing at him. "Amélie, check the dining room, see if he's bothering the other guests." Amélie wiped her hands on her apron, casting a wary glance at the chef before stepping out into the dining area. She spotted Andre, who was quietly observing the room, and noted the subtle poise in his posture. He wasn't bothering anyone. If anything, he was the most composed diner in the room. Returning to the kitchen, she simply said, "He's not causing any problems." Claude sneered. "People like that always cause problems, mark my words." Back at his table, Andre glanced at his watch, noting the deliberate slowness of his service. The waiter finally approached with a plate of hors d'oeuvres, setting it down without a word. The food was beautifully plated but arrived lukewarm, a clear indication it had been left waiting. Andre didn't react, tasting each bite with quiet concentration before jotting down more notes. The night carried on with the same pattern of dismissiveness and quiet observation. As Andre prepared to leave, he glanced toward the kitchen, his gaze meeting Claude's for the briefest moment. Claude's eyes burned with disdain, but Andre simply smiled, a gesture that carried neither malice nor forgiveness, but something in between. With that, Andre stood, leaving a generous tip on the table before walking out. The maitre d' watched him go, his face unreadable, as Andre disappeared into the cool night air. The next morning, the sunlight streamed through the towering windows of Andre's home office. His walls were lined with bookshelves, each filled with culinary guides, cookbooks, and memoirs from chefs worldwide. His desk, cluttered with pens and papers, was anchored by a sleek laptop glowing softly. Andre sipped his coffee, the aroma of freshly brewed beans mingling with the faint scent of cinnamon. He opened his notes from the previous evening, his fingers poised over the keyboard as he began drafting his article. La Maison Étoilée, he typed, the words flowing effortlessly. His tone was measured but cutting, painting a vivid picture of the restaurant's atmosphere and service. He detailed the dismissive treatment, the glaring inequities in service, and, most damningly, the overt prejudice from Chef Claude Renaud. Andre leaned back, rereading the draft. His reputation as a food critic wasn't just built on his discerning palate, but on his ability to see beyond the surface, to uncover the stories that lay beneath the meals. This wasn't just about bad service, it was about a culture of exclusion hiding behind the veneer of fine dining. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, Claude was pacing the kitchen, his nerves frayed. "Do we know who he was?" he barked at the staff. No one answered. His paranoia had been simmering since the moment Andre walked out the door. "You all better hope he's a nobody," Claude muttered darkly. "We can't afford any bad press right now." Amélie worked silently at her station, her hands moving deftly as she prepared a sauce. She had seen this behavior before, the chef lashing out, his arrogance masking the insecurities that festered beneath. She had endured his tirades for years, dreaming of the day she could break free and run her own kitchen. By midday, whispers began circulating among the staff. Someone had recognized Andre Ellis from a feature in Epicurean Monthly, a leading culinary magazine. The realization sent a ripple of unease through the team, but Claude dismissed it with a wave of his hand. "Even if he writes something, who's going to believe him?" Claude sneered. "People like him have no credibility in this industry." Back in his office, Andre added the finishing touches to his article, his words razor-sharp yet restrained. He didn't need to embellish. The truth was damning enough. With a click of his mouse, he sent the piece off to his editor, knowing it would spark a conversation far bigger than a single meal. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Andre sat back in his chair, his gaze falling on the framed photo of his late grandmother on the wall. She had been the one to inspire his love for food, teaching him that every meal carried a story. Tonight, he felt her presence more than ever, a quiet reminder that standing up against injustice was always worth the effort. The next morning, the culinary world would awaken to Andre's review, and La Maison Étoilée would never be the same. The latest issue of Epicurean Monthly hit the shelves on a crisp Monday morning, its sleek cover promising stories of culinary excellence and innovation. Yet, tucked between features of celebrated chefs and vibrant food photography was the article that would set the industry ablaze, Andre Ellis's searing review of La Maison Étoilée. The headline alone stopped readers in their tracks. Behind the gilded curtain, the rot inside La Maison Étoilée. Andre's words were meticulously crafted, each paragraph weaving a damning narrative of the restaurant's culture. He detailed the maitre d's hesitation, the deliberate neglect of service, and, most glaringly, Chef Claude Renaud's open disdain. Yet, Andre didn't stop at his own experience. His piece delved deeper, exposing systemic issues within fine dining, elitism, exclusion, and the unchecked arrogance of chefs who saw themselves as untouchable. The review spread like wildfire, shared across social media platforms, food blogs, and even mainstream news outlets. André's reputation as a trusted voice in the culinary world lent gravitas to the story, making it impossible to ignore. Within hours, the hashtag number La Maison Scandal began trending, with thousands sharing their thoughts on the review. Another example of gatekeeping in fine dining, one tweet read, "Props to André Ellis for calling it out." André watched the online reaction unfold from his home, his phone buzzing incessantly with notifications. He had expected a strong response, but hadn't anticipated the overwhelming flood of support. Former employees of La Maison Étoilée began coming forward, sharing their own harrowing experiences of working under chef Claude Renaud. "Working at La Maison was like walking on eggshells," wrote one anonymous former waitress in a viral Instagram post. Claude's temper was explosive, and his disdain for anyone who didn't fit his mold of perfection was unbearable. "I left after 6 months, and it was the best decision I ever made." Amélie Duval, the restaurant's sous chef, watched the chaos unfold from her modest apartment. She had remained silent for years, enduring Claude's verbal abuse and microaggressions while dreaming of a day she could break free. Now, seeing others speak out gave her a sense of validation she hadn't realized she needed. Claude, meanwhile, was unbothered, at least outwardly. Seated in his opulent office above the restaurant, he sipped his espresso, scrolling through the article on his tablet. "This is nothing," he muttered to himself, smirking. "A few angry tweets and some disgruntled ex-employees won't tarnish my name." But the smirk faded when a call from one of his investors came through. "Claude," the voice on the other end began, tense and clipped. "We need to talk. Now." Over the next few days, the fallout was swift and brutal. A scheduled Michelin review was cancelled, with rumors swirling that La Maison Étoilée would be stripped of multiple stars. Reservations plummeted as patrons canceled en masse, unwilling to associate themselves with a restaurant mired in scandal. Even longtime suppliers began distancing themselves, refusing to take orders from the once celebrated establishment. National news outlets picked up the story, further amplifying the narrative of exclusion and abuse in high-end dining. Morning talk shows debated the ethics of chefs like Claude, with some calling for greater accountability in the industry. By the end of the week, Claude's arrogance began to crack. The restaurant was hemorrhaging money, and a key investor formally pulled out, leaving Claude scrambling for damage control. His public statements, dismissive and defensive, only worsened the situation. "This is a smear campaign by disgruntled individuals," he declared in a televised interview, his tone sharp. "La Maison Étoilée has always upheld the highest standards of excellence." The public, however, wasn't buying it. The once revered chef found himself the subject of ridicule, memes mocking his hubris spreading across the internet. For the first time in his illustrious career, Claude Renaud was facing the one thing he had always feared: irrelevance. As La Maison Étoilée teetered on the edge of closure, Amélie Duval saw an opportunity. For years, she had worked in the shadows, quietly enduring Claude's tirades while perfecting her craft. Now, with the restaurant's reputation in tatters, she decided it was time to step into the light. Emily approached a local community initiative, pitching an idea that had been brewing in her mind for years. She envisioned a restaurant that celebrated diversity, not just in its cuisine, but in its staff and ethos. A space where talented chefs from all walks of life could showcase their skills, free from the oppressive hierarchy that had defined her time under Claude. The initiative agreed, offering funding and support to transform La Maison Étoilée into something entirely new. The restaurant was renamed Maison Nouvelle, a name that reflected its fresh start. The once exclusive menu was replaced with a vibrant selection of dishes inspired by global cuisines, each crafted by chefs who brought their unique perspectives and stories to the table. When the news broke that Amélie was taking over, the culinary world buzzed with excitement. Her reputation as a skilled and innovative chef preceded her, and many saw her rise as a long overdue triumph. André received an invitation to the grand reopening, a handwritten note from Amélie herself. "Your words lit the spark we needed," it read. "Thank you for helping us find our way to a better future." On the night of the reopening, Maison Nouvelle was a hive of activity. The restaurant, once cold and intimidating, now exuded warmth and vibrancy. Local artists had adorned the walls with colorful murals, and the scent of spices filled the air, hinting at the diverse flavors waiting to be savored. Andre entered, greeted by Amelie at the door. She looked radiant, her white chef's coat pristine, and her face glowing with pride. "Welcome, Mr. Ellis," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I can't thank you enough for what you've done." Andre smiled, shaking her hand. "You did the hard part, Amelie. I just told the truth." The meal that followed was nothing short of extraordinary. Andre savored every bite, his palate dancing with flavors that told stories of resilience, creativity, and unity. Amelie's signature dish, a delicate fusion of French technique and West African spices, was the highlight, a testament to her vision for the restaurant. As the evening drew to a close, Amelie raised a glass, addressing the room. "Maison Nouvelle isn't just a restaurant," she said, her voice carrying a quiet strength. "It's a reminder that the culinary world can be a space for everyone. Thank you for believing in this dream." The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers echoing through the space that had once been defined by exclusion but was now a symbol of hope. Meanwhile, miles away, Claude Renaud sat in the dimly lit dining room of his hastily opened bistro. The space was sparsely filled, the patrons uninterested, and the air heavy with the weight of his fall from grace. His name, once synonymous with excellence, had become a cautionary tale. Back at Maison Nouvelle, Andre lingered over the last bites of Amelie's dish, a sense of fulfillment washing over him. The industry still had a long way to go, but tonight was proof that change was possible when someone dared to speak out. As he left the restaurant, the vibrant sounds of laughter and clinking glasses followed him into the cool night air. Andre smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning of a much-needed revolution. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey of resilience, accountability, and hope. Andre's story reminds us of the power one voice can have in sparking change, even in the most elite and unyielding spaces. It's about staying true to your values, standing up against discrimination, and helping pave the way for a more inclusive future. If this story resonated with you, let us know in the comments and share your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell for updates, and tell us where you're listening from. Stay tuned for more stories that inspire, challenge, and stay with you long after they end. Until next time, stay hopeful, stay strong, and keep fighting for a better world.